This week on Torah Pearls.
To harass Edom or not? That is the question. The answer depends on which text you read.
The Deuteronomist says that it's 11 days' journey from Horeb to Kadesh. What map is he using when Numbers chapter 33 has 21 encampments between Sinai and what it calls Kadesh in the wilderness of Zin?
Horeb or Sinai? Same or different?
In our Torah portion, Israel commits genocide against their enemies. But does this agree with the Moses Scroll?
Hey, whose idea was it to send the spies?
In Deuteronomy, did the spies, 12 spies, come back with a bad report or a good report?
All right, Jono, let's jump in.
Let's get into it. G'day, dear viewers, and thank you for your company once again here on truth2u.org, truth number 2 letter u.org. I'm Jono Vandor, I know my name, and joining me from the Horeb Institute in Louisiana is the author of the Moses Scroll, Ross K. Nichols. G'day, Ross.
Hello, Jono Vandor. How are you, my friend?
Oh, Vandor, that's where I am. I'm doing very well, thank you, my friend. We are finally, we are in our favorite book of the Pentateuch, our favorite book of the Torah.
Hallelujah.
And that, of course, is Deuteronomy. Of course, everybody has their Torah tablet, their Deuteronomy Torah tablet, as they should. If you don't, link in the description. We're going to be doing this for the next, how many weeks? We've got a few more weeks.
Man, I think it's 12 weeks. Jonah, let me also say that people can look down there. There are a lot of other links that are very beneficial. We have a link to the Moses Scroll. We have a link to Fragments of a Leather Manuscript. We have a link to Edon Dershowitz's book, and there are all sorts of helpful links that we're going to be going through in some of this discussion and other things. I mean, there's a lot of helpful stuff down there.
That you are absolutely right. Fragments of the Leather. You just mentioned Fragments of the Leather. Just tell us again, what book is this one?
Yeah, Fragments of a Leather Manuscript is an academic, the only academic study of the manuscript fragments from the 19th century. So in 1883, about this time of year, actually, two German scholars sat down together, Hermann Goethe and Edward Meyer. They did a week-long examination, almost, in the Hotel Haffa in Leipzig. The results of that were published and virtually went unnoticed, particularly in the English-speaking world, until friends of ours, the Tylers, helped finance through their company an English translation. I did the Hebrew, and one of their translators did the German to English. So anyway, people can pick that up. The link's in the description. It gives not only the academic assessment based on these scholars' views, but also a transcription and a translation of some of the manuscripts. So,
and it is really handy. I just got to say, I take that in my briefcase everywhere I go. Every time I go to the library, it's one of those go-to books that I have on my desk, because at any given moment when studying the Moses Scroll, you're going to reach over and grab that and just double-check what Goethe has to say.
That's right.
There is that. Thank you for a link in the description. Devarim is where we are. We are kicking off in Deuteronomy. And to kick off, of course, we do have our AI critical scholar, Ezra. Ezra, perhaps you can give us an academic overview.
And by the way, I want to add one thing, Ezra. If you don't mind, make sure that you tell us, why is the book referred to as Deuteronomy?
It's good to be in Deuteronomy. Finally, this is the fifth and final book of the Torah, and things are starting to feel a little like a farewell speech because, well, that's exactly what it is. But before we get into that, the name Deuteronomy comes to us not from Hebrew, but from the Greek deuteronomion, meaning second law. That's based on a mistranslation in the Septuagint of a phrase in the Hebrew, Mishneh HaTorah, which probably just meant a copy of the teaching. But the Greek translators thought it meant a second law, hence the name. The Hebrew name Devarim just means words, taken from the book's opening. These are the words which Moses spoke. Now, academically speaking, chapters 1 through 322 are the opening section of Moses' first major speech. It's not so much new legislation yet, it's historical prologue. Moses is recounting Israel's journey through the wilderness, highlighting key moments of rebellion and divine guidance. He recalls the failed entry into the land after the spy episode, the long detour around Edom, Moab, and Ammon, and the recent military victories over Sihon and Og. It's all retrospective, But it's not just nostalgia, it's theological framing. Moses is reinterpreting Israel's past through the lens of covenant loyalty and divine justice, prepping the people to hear the legal material that will follow. From a scholarly lens, this section shows clear marks of Deuteronomistic style, long, sermonic prose, heavy on theological reflection, and loaded with covenantal language. This isn't J, E, or P talking. It's the Deuteronomist school, probably writing or editing during the late monarchic or early exilic period, looking back at Israel's past with a critical but hopeful eye. So yes, happy to be here in Deuteronomy. It's Moses' mic drop, but with footnotes.
Well,
so
now by the way, he gave the typical academic view of Deuteronomy. You'll notice several things, and some of what we're going to have to say might challenge some of that.
Exactly, we will be challenging that because, of course, this season we are doing Torah Pearls through the lens of the Moses Scroll and through the lens of the documentary hypothesis. And speaking of which, and to the point of Ezra's last paragraph there, we have a new source, Ross. We're kicking off with a new source. It is a source that we have not. Now, am I correct in saying this? This is a source that we have not seen in our previous books. What is this source?
That's correct. And generally, if we're talking about the documentary hypothesis, people assume that Deuteronomy is in its entirety D. That's almost true. There's some things that we're going to run into later, but I do want to say that most scholars, and you've been looking at Baden as well, so I'm interested to see what you find there as we work through these sessions. There's a couple of differences.
We'll touch on that.
But one of the things that we notice is that scholars have divided D between DTR, which would be, the earliest strata, DTR1, DTR2, and so forth. Now, those that have the Torah tablet will see that marked. And what you'll notice is that we begin with DTR1. Let me just make this point as we jump into this, Jono. That's because even today, most scholars believe that, I'm going to say most scholars believe that the core of the document, the earliest strata, which they would date to the 7th century BCE, is chapters 12 through 26, that law code.
Yeah.
And yet, we're going to look at that. We're going to challenge that greatly in this session and, as we work through these different Torah portions. But I will say that when Ezra talked about the naming of Deuteronomy, the interesting point to me, all of it that he said was correct, but I wanted to bring up that that's in Deuteronomy 17, and they base this idea on a copy of the Torah, Mishneh HaTorah. I actually believe that even though that's part of the law code, and I would date that later than the Moses Scroll, I would propose that there's an interesting reason that memory exists, because we're going to show, I believe we're going to show rather effectively, that the scroll that was discovered in the days of Josiah is the core, but it's not the same core scholars believe it is. Got off on a tangent there, but I just wanted to establish that.
That's good. And so just again, if you don't have Deuteronomy Torah tablet, you can get a link in the description. And we have one of the features of the Torah tablet is, of course, the sources as Richard Elliott Friedman presents them. And it kicks off with DTR1, which I guess is what Richard Elliott Friedman refers to as the Deuteronomist. And am I correct about that?
It's one strata, yes. Definitely, yes. So you've got the core, and then these are later additions.
Now, we do have, I'm pretty certain that throughout our entire, Devarim, this particular Torah portion, I don't think he deviates from that view. I think we stay in DTR1 all the way through.
Yeah, I believe you're right.
Okay, that's fine. And you mentioned Baden. So there are just a couple of areas. And this is where it gets interesting, Ross, because we're looking at it from the perspective of taking the Moses Scroll into consideration, giving it the benefit of the doubt and saying, perhaps this is the original document upon which this is based.
Right.
Okay, that's fine. That would mean that the Moses Scroll is Mosaic. We can call that M, if you like, as the source. And but scholars have a different view, and they don't take into consideration this document. Baden, for example, attributes verse 3 of Deuteronomy chapter 1 as a priestly source, a little priestly insertion. So we're going to look at that. So let's jump into the first few verses. These are the words, Ross. These are the words. Now, by the way, one of the things that I love about the Torah tablet, particularly now that we are in Deuteronomy, is that you can highlight that which is the Moses scroll. I just found this really helpful. So, for example, various pages, just highlight that which concurs with the Moses scroll. Bits of information. It's really handy because you can just look at it immediately and go, oh, okay, this verse is largely derived
from.
Right. Very good. What I've done at the very beginning is I put it in blue. The reason why I put it in blue rather than yellow, which is what I've done for the Moses scroll proper, is because this is a scribal note. It begins with a scribal note.
That's right.
Both Deuteronomy and the Moses scroll do this. So we have these are the words which Moses spake unto all Israel beyond the Jordan in the wilderness, in the Arabah. Okay, let's stop there. Beyond the Jordan in the wilderness, Ross.
Yeah. This was one of the first things that I noticed, Jono. I didn't read Baden. I didn't read Friedman. The first time this hit me with full force, these are the words that Moses spoke, and I recognized the third person. Jono, I didn't know what I was going to do because then it sent me scrambling on quite a few years, and you were right there with me fielding a lot of these concerns that I had. But this is one of the things that really struck me is that this isn't Moses, and whoever wrote this is on the wrong side of the Jordan. So not only do we know that it's not Moses who wrote this, and we don't know who wrote it, but we do know that whoever wrote it was in the land of Canaan, because they say these are the words that Moses spoke on the other side of the Jordan, or as the ASV says, beyond the Jordan. And we know, by the way, from chapter 3, verse 27, people want to put that in their notes, that Moses never crossed over. So for anyone to be talking from the other side of the Jordan, it's not Moses.
Quite right. It continues, and the beginning of this has mostly in common with the scribal head note in the Moses scroll, but then it departs, Ross, just about here in verse 1, over against Suf, between Paran and Tophel and Laban and Hazarot and Zahab, and then verse 2, it is 11 days' journey from Horeb by the way of Mount Seir unto Kadesh Barnea. All right, let's stop there. 11 days' journey from Horeb. Now, does this give us any clue as to where Horeb is or where Mount Kadesh Barnea or Mount Seir? What do we know about this verse? This is a curious verse. 11 days' journey, Ross.
I tell you, it doesn't give me enough to really make any determination, but I'm just one person. From what I understand and from what I have looked into, Anati, the Italian explorer who claimed that Horeb was actually a place that you and I have been to, right? We've been there on several expeditions with the Tylers, but that's Har Karkum. He discovered it in the 50s, and he actually determined, based on this, and Deborah Hearn, who just recently got her PhD, focused on the wilderness itineraries. That's right. Yeah. Brilliant scholar. And several other top scholars have used this 11 days to sort of chart a course. So whether it is or is not, in other words, if somebody wants to argue that this is part of the original scroll or not, which I would say it's clearly by a voice other than Moses, but some have at least proposed that it does give enough information to help. It's pretty ambiguous to me.
Yes. Now, I'm glad you said that. I do agree with you. It is ambiguous. It is another voice. Both of those things should be taken into account. And when you go back to Numbers chapter 33, in our last Torah portion, we have a itinerary. Now, you pointed out when we got there that this is one of the 7 things that the Torah says Moses wrote.
That's right.
I don't believe that this is Mosaic, but it is an itinerary in Numbers chapter 33. And the interesting thing about that is that from Sinai to Kadesh, and they have this particular itinerary has Kadesh much later in its list of travels. There's something like 21 stops. There's 21 encampments before they get there. Is that 11 days? I mean, is that if one person walking straight without I don't. It seems to be a different. It seems to be a different map, Ross. So, by which map is this statement made, and what does the writer have in mind? And we don't. We really don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now, I tell you, before you leave the subject of the voice of the narrator. Are you still in those first few verses? Where are you?
I am still in the first few verses.
Keep going, but before we get to verse 6, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to throw into the mix before we do move on. Verse 19, which says, Deuteronomy 1:19, and we journeyed from Horeb and went through all that great and terrible wilderness which you saw. And it goes on to say, by the way of the hill country of the Amorites, Jehovah our God commanded us, and we came to Kadesh Barnea. And again, this seems to be indicating something a little bit different again. But nevertheless, we come back to verse 3. Now, verse 3, Ross, is what Baden says is a priestly insertion.
I see why he does it. I mean, he's got a point. Go ahead.
I think he does. But it says, and it came to pass in the 40th year, in the 11th month. Now, whenever we get to dates, on the first day of the month, okay, that's saying, hello, priestly material here. We're really concerned about dates. We're very, very particular about these things. That Moses spake, and then we rejoin our Moses scroll right here. It says, unto the children of Israel, according to the mouth, according to all that Jehovah had given him in commandment to them. There's a little bit, there's a few crumbs of Moses scroll in there. So he attributes that verse to the priestly contributor, the priestly source.
I could see why he would say that, and just so that the viewers don't get so confused. I mean, look, this is a hypothesis, so scholars debate the details of this back and forth, and so you just have to give the merit to whichever argument makes the most sense. And I think in this case, he's got a good point.
Yeah, it's a possibility. After he had smitten Sihon, the king of the Amorites. Now we're jumping ahead in the narrative here, Ross. It's giving a little bit away. But smitten Sihon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt in Heshbon, and Og, the king of Bashan, who dwelt in Asherot at Idri, beyond the Jordan, in the land of Moab, beyond the Jordan, began Moses to declare this law, saying, all right, go ahead.
It's like a long, long intro, but it's very, let's say it was accurate to the T, and people can argue that all they want, but let's say it is, just for the sake of a temporary point in the argument. Here's the deal. Something's about to change in the narrative, and this is what really jumps out, and I think this is the most important thing that a person can recognize when studying the Pentateuch. This is clearly a priestly hand. I'm just going to broadly call it a priestly hand that's giving us an introduction like we see in so many of the books of the Bible. Look at the book of Jeremiah, the words of Jeremiah, the son of, and goes on, and he was a prophet during this king's reign and that king's reign, and this. That's not Jeremiah, but Jeremiah then kicks off first person and says, the Lord said unto me, Well, this is what we see here. You see third person narrator helping out. Narrator's voice is telling us a little bit of a story, as you pointed out, even looking way ahead, in the narrative. And then all of a sudden, that's when we pick up in verse 6, which is very interesting.
It's very interesting. And one of the things that happens immediately is that we jump into the first person, as you've pointed out. Now, and also right at this point, we also leap into the scroll proper of the Moses scroll. The difference between these two documents, there's quite a lot of differences. We're pointing them out. But straight up, Deuteronomy is going to have Jehovah, our God, spake unto us at Horeb. whereas the Moses Scroll obviously uses Elohim exclusively.
Right.
It's Elohim.
Yep.
Only the head note and the footnote of the scribe, the library notes, if you like, uses Jehovah, as we have it here as well. But here in Deuteronomy, Ross, Jehovah our God spoke to us, or spake to us in Horeb, saying, "Ye have dwelt long enough at this mountain. Turn you and take your journey and go to the hill country, the Amorites, and unto all his places thereunto in the Aravar." Right, stop. Now, so my first question, Ross, and this applies obviously here as to the Moses Scroll as well. Why start here? Why doesn't it say, Ross, Elohim spoke to me at the burning bush, saying, or why doesn't it say, Aaron and I spoke to Pharaoh, saying, or why doesn't it say Elohim spoke to us in Ramses, saying, as per Numbers 33, for example? Why not begin with the 10 words? So what's your opinion on that?
Man, that's a good question. That is a very good question. Why start here? You know, first of all, let me just say, people will often say Deuteronomy represents a series of speeches, and I can do this pretty quickly, but it's just a point I want to get out because it sounds a little bit like someone might be recording Moses giving this speech. But I believe, and there are several articles on thetorah.com when I was first researching the Moses Scroll that suggest that this is a written document. So I'll give you an example where it says Moses began to declare this law. That phrase is only used two other places. Once in Deuteronomy 27, which means it's talking about something which is written plainly. The other is that passage in Habakkuk where it says, "Write the vision plainly, that he who reads it can run with it." So I think, first of all, why does it start here? Maybe I can answer it with what I just prefaced, because this is where it starts. The start of the scroll of Moses is actually here. And it just simply says, we left Horeb together, and then it leads up quickly. It goes through what I believe you have to have a brief travel itinerary because Numbers 33 is trying to recall the itinerary. It says we know that Moses wrote a travel log, but they had lost it, and we know they lost it because Numbers 33 doesn't agree with Deuteronomy's chapters, nor does it agree with Exodus.
No.
So anyway, that's just sort of a kind of a quick answer, but what do you think? Why did they not start with some of these other good points?
So again, we do find out as we continue, obviously, that the 10 words do become the center point of the entire document. That's fine. It's not being neglected here. But where Moses is picking up is he's saying, okay, so, we were at Horeb. The thing happened at Horeb. We'll talk about that later. Don't worry about that. But Elohim spoke to us and said, now it's time to move on. And I think what he's saying to his contemporary audience is that there were men of the rebellion, as the Moses Scroll labels them, as opposed to men of battle or men of the warriors, men of war, as we'll find out in Deuteronomy. But I think he wants to pick up and say, those guys aren't with us. Let's begin there. Let me tell you what happened there and tell you why you are here. And I think he's supplying the backstory as to why that is so. Do you think that's fair?
It could be. It could very well be. I was gonna ask you a question, and we read over it, but one of the points that you stopped and gave a little bit of a pause, but you know how it says according to I think here in the ASV, how does it put it? Not according to the mouth, but according to the commandment. Yes. Anyway, the Hebrew.
According to all, now, I don't know that the ASV, I'm not sure that it doesn't say according to the mouth of Jehovah.
Right.
In the Hebrew of Deuteronomy, I wonder if it does, but it certainly does, I think, if I remember correctly, in the Moses Scroll. And the interesting thing about that, if I may, is that in the Moses Scroll proper, there is zero anthropomorphical references. So the mouth of Jehovah, the mighty hand and outstretched arm, all of that sort of stuff. There's no There's nothing anthropomorphical. There's nothing man-like about the entity of Elohim in the Moses Scroll, which is remarkable in the whole thing.
Wait. In the document itself, but in the head note, it does have, according to the mouth of.
In the head note, yeah.
In the head note, that's right. And we would admit, and most scholars who've looked at this with a fair shake have said, this is clearly a different hand. But I just wanted to mention that because I looked in the Moses Scroll, and on page 159, first page of the translation, it does say that phrase, according to the mouth of Jehovah, using the English, in Hebrew does not appear in Deuteronomy 1:1, but it does occur one other time in our scroll, its closing line. The phrase occurs in the Masoretic text 21 times, only one in Deuteronomy 34:5. And then Richard Elliott Friedman attributes 9 to P, 6 to the redactor, 1 to J, and 1 to other. I just pointed that out. In other words, it's all over the place.
Yeah.
Everybody uses this phrase almost.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Now, speaking of words that are not used, we are in Horeb. He spoke to us in Horeb. Now, tell us about Horeb and Sinai and the relationship that these designations have in Deuteronomy.
It really is interesting. The scroll, our scroll, the Moses Scroll, always uses Horeb and never uses Sinai. So now what we see is that this is one of the things that's almost exclusive to no exception. Even in the Pentateuch, you have a division. You have Sinai is used in certain texts and Horeb is used in others. I'm not going to read the exact verses, but Horeb, in Deuteronomy, uses Horeb 9 times. Horeb is used outside of Deuteronomy only in 3 passages in Exodus. Sinai is preferred outside of Deuteronomy, being used 34 times in Exodus, Leviticus, and Number. Sinai only occurs once in Deuteronomy 33, but that's a third-person text. So it's our author of Deuteronomy, let's say authors, but Deuteronomy is really going to favor Horeb, and this is really almost the first time we've met it, other than those 3 passages in Exodus. So.
Quite right. Yeah, and of course, as you mentioned, the Moses Scroll only uses Horeb. It is my opinion, and this is just an opinion, that Horeb and Sinai are in fact 2 different mountains. We often hear from apologists that these are just 2 different names of the same mountain, but actually I think they are different mountains, and I think perhaps a particular source favored Sinai. It was grander, it was bigger, it was more prestigious, it was better known, and all of this and that. And for whatever reason, they decided just to change it and make it Sinai. Sinai's better. Don't worry about it.
Right.
I suspect
let's ask Ezra just to give us a quick summary of the differences between the use of Horeb and Sinai. I think that'd be interesting to see. What do you think, Ezra?
The Horeb versus Sinai conundrum, a favorite among source critics. You're right to point out that the terminology is not uniform, and that's usually our first clue that we're dealing with multiple traditions. In general, the E and D sources use Horeb, while J and P prefer Sinai. So, when you're in Deuteronomy, or the so-called Moses Scroll tradition, which aligns pretty closely with the Deuteronomists' theology, you'll almost always see Horeb. Flip over to Exodus and Leviticus, especially in priestly or older narrative material, and Sinai dominates. As for whether these were originally 2 different mountains, that's very much a live scholarly theory. Some propose that Sinai was a southern tradition, possibly Midianite or even Kenite in origin, while Horeb reflects a northern, perhaps Ephraimite perspective. Over time, as the traditions were redacted together, the 2 names were blended and eventually treated as interchangeable. So yes, Horeb and Sinai may have started out as 2 distinct locations or cultic sites, each with their own stories and theophanies, but were later conflated in the national memory as the Mountain of Revelation. 1 mountain, 2 names, many layers.
How about that?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, certainly. So, and we find out later on, Ross, that we won't go into detail now, but we will a little later. But we see that, particularly in the Moses Scroll, Horeb seems to be in the vicinity of Kadesh Barnea. He goes back and forth from these 2 locations seemingly quickly. That's one of the reasons why and I've mentioned this many times, long-time viewers will recognize this, but I favor C.S. Jarvis's view regarding Jebel Halal. And to quote him, if I may, he said, if one searches for a suitable mountain in northern Sinai for the site of the law-giving, Jebel Halal, 30 miles south of El Arish, which is, that's the Wadi of Egypt, right? At once suggests itself, it is a most imposing limestone massif, a massif over 2,000 feet high and standing up in the midst of a vast alluvial plain. And though very much smaller than Mount Moses, which is the traditional, it is far more impressive as it stands by itself, whereas Mount Moses is only one of some 10 peaks of similar size in an area of 20 square miles and is neither the highest nor the grandest of the range. But what we do know is that if Kadesh Barnea is where archaeologists, generally believe it is, on the border there with Egypt and Israel, then Jebel Halal is just not that far. It's walking distance between the two.
It is a tall mountain, though, and one of the things that because I don't know, I've read several, and I think one of the best books on the subject is Menashe Har-El's book on wilderness journeys. Mm-hmm. That's hard to get a hold of now, but it offers even a different one. But it mentions several different ones. But I always think about the aged Moses running up and down a mountain. How many times did he do that? Of course, according to Moses' scroll, he didn't have to do it as many times as he does in the Pentateuch. But
he does it twice.
Yeah, maybe
or maybe three.
But either way, I don't necessarily think it has to be that impressive. In fact, a very popular scholar who got mad at me on Facebook, not the one we were talking about today, but another one, actually
happens all the time, Ross.
It happens all the time. got really angry, I guess, like maybe turned his nostrils flared or whatever. But he says that when I mentioned going to Khartoum, he said, well, it can't be that one because it's such a puny little mountain. In other words, we want our Sinai's big, like we want a tall Sinai, and we want a deep biblical sea to split so that the water is, 1,000, 1,200 meters above their head. Got to be big. Anyway, so I don't know. Right. But Horeb.
So moving on. So you've dwelt long enough at this mountain. Turn and go to the hill country, the Amorites, and to all his places thereunto in the Arava, in the hill country and in the lowland. Now here we have boundaries of the land to be, Ross. Mm-hmm. And what we have in the Moses scroll is where it says in the Arava, in the hill country, in the lowland, and by the sea shore. Yam Suf will get to that. Mm-hmm. But here in Deuteronomy, it adds to that, and in the Negev, or in the south, and the land of the Canaanites and Lebanon, and as far as the great river, the river Euphrates. Mm-hmm. That's pretty big.
Yeah, that's big.
That's pretty big.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's see. Where do you want to go? Oh, yeah, okay. So just got a note here, is commonly referred to as the general designation. Oh, yes. So the point here in the Moses scroll, by the way, Ross, is that it is the Amorite who is the primary, if not the sole.
That's right.
The sole target of the conquest of the Israelites. We don't have Canaanites or any of the other 7 listed nations that we find later on in Deuteronomy, but it's worth pointing out.
Mm-hmm. Good stuff. No, I'm ready. What I have next in my notes, you jump in if you have something else, is the section that deals with the appointment of leaders. Deuteronomy 1:9 through 18. Do you have something before that?
Just very briefly, verse 8 says, I've set this whole, look at the land, check it out, big, that I promised to give to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and to Jacob, just to throw into the mix here that the Moses scroll never mentions those names. As we're going to find out, it does mention Lot, strangely enough, but we'll get there soon enough. So the designation, Ross, the designation of the burden of the Israelites, my goodness, they're a burden. What is going on But we've got a couple of variations to this story. One is in Exodus 18, the other one in Numbers 11. How is this one different?
Yeah, it's interesting because the Masoretic text credits Moses alone as, when you talk about the burden of leadership. So it says, I spake to you at that time. I'm not able to bear you myself alone. And then if you go down, verse 12, how can I myself alone bear? Verse 13, take you wise men and understanding and known and so forth. So according to this, it's Moses' idea. Moses is burdened by the leadership. He comes up with the solution for that, and he walks forward on his solution. I. First person. By the way, this is the only first person of the three different sections that deal with the burden of leadership, as you mentioned, in the Book of Numbers and in these other texts which talk about it, Exodus 18. In Exodus 18, the story is that it's Jethro, the multi-named father-in-law, Jethro Ru El Hobab Jether, who comes up with this in Exodus chapter 18. This is pretty interesting whenever you read this because it's so different. And what are your thoughts on that? There's no Jethro. There is no Jethro.
There's none at all. Not at all. It's entirely Moses's idea. I'm not able to bear you by myself, and so Jehovah, the God of your fathers, make you 1,000 times as many as you are, bless you, and so on and so forth. But I need some wise men to delegate the burden that is you. So we do that, and again, I think this is really just we need a story as an excuse for future authority that wants to impose religious authority on the people. Who made, as they said to Moses in Exodus, who made you prince over us? We see that a couple of times, and they would say most certainly the same thing to anyone else who would try and exercise. Well, you see, let me tell you the story about that. You'll see in in Deuteronomy or in Exodus 18 or in Numbers chapter 11 that God did ordain us as authority in Mosaic authority over you, and here it is in the line of succession and so on and so forth. And how many times have we heard that? But of course, it's not in the Moses scroll. Verse 19, Ross, again, the great and terrible wilderness, journey between Horeb and Kadesh, whereas the Moses scroll places the journey of the great and terrible wilderness after they leave Kadesh, which is interesting.
Yeah, the order of the march, as we would call it. This is one of the problems that a lot of people notice when they really get into this, and some would seek to maybe hope to ignore it, but you really can't. Whenever you look at particularly the order of stops, I encourage people all the time to use horizontal reading. Put anything you have in the book of Exodus, if Numbers, all the way through, and just look at them and see, does the order go, in the same order or not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and it doesn't quite often.
It doesn't. So they rock up to the hill country of the Amorites. Jehovah our God commanded us. We've come to Kadesh Barnea, and I said to you, you've come to the hill country of the Amorites, which Jehovah our God gives to us. Behold, Jehovah our God has set the land before you. Go up and take possession, as Jehovah your God the God of our fathers. That's an interesting designation. Hath spoken unto thee. Fear not, neither be dismayed. Now we find ourselves in the 12 spies narrative. Once again, we don't have the 12 spies narrative in the Moses scroll. So this is really interesting. And it's not a foreign concept. We do have the request to go and spy out the land when we get to Jazza, I think it is, on the other side.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is fine. It's as if they're saying, okay, so we got to go and take this area now. Let's just go and check out the land, the lay of the land, so that we can figure out the way that let's be strategic about this. Let's do it. Okay, fine, go and do it. Maybe they did something like this before they took the hill country of the Amorites as well. We just don't have that in the Moses scroll. But that aside, Ross, this story is different to the other story that we have.
Yeah. Well, like you said, whether there was an event like this, that really happened that we just don't have a record of in the Moses scroll, Here's why we know something's going on. There is a faulty recollection here. Whose idea, just like whose idea was it, to do this burden of leadership? Once again, we have conflicting narratives. So, for instance, if you have Deuteronomy open, do you have Deuteronomy open, and you can tell me whose idea it was to send the spies?
This is. Let me see. So, came to you. You all came to me, every one of you, and said, "Yeah, they did. Let's send men." And Moses considers this and goes, "Yeah, okay, that's cool. Let's do that."
That's a good idea.
It's the people's idea, and Moses approves it, right?
Okay, so Numbers chapter 13 and 14 give the spy story in the book of Bamidbar. And here's what it says. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Send men to scout the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelite people."
Narrative.
Yeah. So whose idea is it? Now, what happens, just quickly, people read these divergent accounts, and they conflate the two, and they try to make up a story that's not in the text to consider both of these as the right answer. But they're different stories. They're different narratives.
Totally different
So we
stories.
just don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Verse 23, "And the thing pleased me well," says Moses, "pleased me well. And I took 12 men of you, one from every tribe." So again, we have 12 tribes here. And the question becomes, well,
which tribes?
Which tribes? Is this the list with Manasseh and Ephraim, or is this the list with Joseph and Levi? We do find out all the way down in chapter 27 that the Deuteronomist is wanting a 12 list of tribes with Joseph and Levi, as opposed to what is actually in the Moses scroll, which is the list with Ephraim and Manasseh. But here we don't know. What we do know, Ross, it's quite curious, is that I think is it Numbers chapter 13, verse 8? It is. Numbers chapter 13, verse 8 is the only verse, as far as I know, that designates a tribe to Joshua.
Hosea,
and says that he is of Ephraim. It's also in Hosea? That's what you're saying?
No, I was just reading from verse 8. From the tribe of Ephraim, Hoshea, son of Nun.
Hoshea, right.
Yeah.
And so he is of Ephraim. Now, if that's the case, then Manasseh is not represented in this 12-tribe list because Joshua would be representing Joseph. Okay? But nevertheless, it doesn't go into detail, just throwing that into the mix. But what I will say, well, let me read it here because it's interesting the way that this narrative reads. It says, "They turned and went up into the hill country, the Amorites. They came to the valley of Eshcol, spied it out, and they took the fruit of the land in their hands, and they brought it down to us and brought us word. And they said," and this is what they said, Ross, they said this, "It is a good land, which Jehovah our God is giving us." That's their report. Their report is good, is my point. And yet, it says, "Yet, even though they gave you a good report, you would not go up, but rebelled against the commandment of Jehovah your God. And you murmured in your tents, and you said, because Jehovah hates us, that he brought us forth out of the land of Egypt to deliver us into the hand of the Amorites, to destroy us. Why are we going up there? Our brothers have made our heart to melt, saying." Now, what happens here is that because of the previous narrative that we've read in Numbers, we then have to assume that the brothers, our brethren, and the spies who came back with a good report have also come. The brethren and the spies are one and the same. But I don't read it as being necessarily the case here, Ross. What's your thoughts?
I don't know. I mean, I haven't really thought about that. You threw it to me, and I don't know.
Well, now our brethren, I'm assuming those who are not the spies, while they are gone, they're murmuring to the people and sowing doubt in the people's minds. The people are greater and taller than we. The cities are great and fortified up to heaven. Moreover, we have seen the sons of the Anakim there.
Got to have some giants in the mix. Got to have some giants.
Got to have giants. And I said to you, dread not, neither be afraid of them. Jehovah your God does go before you. He will fight for you according to all that he did for you in Egypt before your eyes and in the wilderness and so on and so forth. But it's too late. The people are freaked out by their brethren, and it doesn't seem to be the spies. It's a different narrative.
No, I get you. And
Yeah.
there are some who propose, and Idan Dershowitz gets into this quite a bit. We'll be able to talk more about it later in another setting, but the spy narrative without the spies is quite an odd thing to say. But could it be that God is actually mad at them for something else? And then the question becomes, who's mad at who for what? Like, why is it, one of the stories is that Moses is not allowed into the promised land because of something that he did, right? Smiting of the rock and all that. But I think this is where we'll get into at some point. You just tell me when to jump. But Moses kind of gives a different story on that. Do you remember that in verse 37? Are you there
Yeah,
yet?
he does.
Or you want to?
We're almost there. Let me just read 34 because that does concur with Moses' scroll. It picks up here again. It says, in Moses' scroll, then Elohim heard, but Jehovah heard the voice of your words and was wroth and swore, saying, surely there shall not be one of these men of this evil generation. Now that's Deuteronomy. It's a little bit different in the Moses scroll. See the good land which I swore to give unto their fathers, except for Caleb, the son of Jephunneh. He'll see it. And then it goes on to say how great he is. And then it says in 37, what does it say, Ross?
In 37, because of you, the Lord was incensed with me too. And he said, you shall not enter it. And I have a note in my Bible that says, really? Because this is four times in Deuteronomy. We're going to see them all. We'll see another one in this Torah portion. But 4 times Moses says it's their fault that he's not allowed to go in. He doesn't have any recollection in the book of Deuteronomy of striking a rock or anything like that causes him not to go in. But here in Deuteronomy, at least in these later interpolated passages, it seems to be that he's certainly blaming them for his own trouble. One other point, you mentioned Caleb and Joshua, they play prominent roles in all of this. My notes have this: punishment spares Caleb and Joshua, chapters 135 through 36. But Numbers 14:24 initially omits Joshua. The LXX adds him in Numbers, and then Tegay and Friedman view this as a reworking of the priestly material to stress human faults. Anyway.
It is a little bit mysterious because when you read it in the Moses scroll, they are mentioned together. Here, there's just that little bit of a gap there where Moses says, I'm not going because what you guys did at Kadesh Barnea, fine. And, by the way, sort of Joshua bin Nun as well, he can go in there as well. Then verse 39, again, Baden, I think, attributes this to the redactor. Added much later, but it contains crumbs of the Moses scroll as well, because it says, moreover, your little ones, I will give it unto them. But what Deuteronomy has is, moreover, your little ones that you said should be prey, and your children this day have no knowledge of good or evil. They shall go hither, and unto them I will give it, and they shall possess it. So there's a few little crumbs of Moses scroll in there as well, but Baden attributes that to the redactor. All right, then we get to, but as for you, verse 40, but as for you, take your journey into the wilderness by the way of the Sea of Reeds.
What's that
Sea
mean?
of Reeds, Ross, Yam Suf.
Yeah. We've got different locations for Yam Suf, Jono. We have to decide. We have in Exodus chapter 10, the first mention of Yam Suf is clearly the region in the Delta Nile region, because it describes the plagues and the wind blowing, and it can't mean any other Yam Suf.
Right.
But biblically, we also have the Gulf, what we now call the Gulf of Suez and the Gulf of Aqaba. They too are both referred to as the Sea of Reeds, Yam Suf. So we have to ask the question, which Yam Suf is it talking about? What do you think?
My opinion is that the Yam Suf that this is referring to is the southern tip of the Dead Sea. And you and I have been there, and we've driven all around that southern tip. And it is certainly a Yam Suf in the sense that it is just absolutely thick with reeds. The reason why I say that, Ross, is because the journey takes them there in the Moses scroll. The journey, so what happens in the Moses scroll is that the men of the rebellion, those who did not go up and take the hill country of the Amorites, are condemned instead to live out their days in Kadesh Barnea. It's as if God is retributively saying to them, "You're accusing me of setting you up to die. Well, how about you just die where you are? You die there." And then he says to everyone, "But you stay here until all of these men that refuse to go up die off from amidst the camp. And once they do, then you take up the mantle and you go and execute the commandment to take the hill country of the Amorites into this wilderness, what we refer to as the Negev today, by way of the Sea of Reeds." And what we find is that maybe they went down through Ma'ale Akrabim, maybe they went down through the ascent of the Scorpion, where you and I have been. Maybe they ended up, and I like to think this is true, but I really do think that this is probably the case because there was a water source there, Iravot, where you and I have spent, probably months at this stage.
Yeah.
Iravot is a natural spring of water. There's a water source there. Wherever you end up, you need a water source. And it says in Deuteronomy that they ended up there and they crossed at Wadi Zera. They skirted the hill country.
And that's in the same area as well,
of Seir. And that's right. And Iravot, you're looking at the hill country. It's one of my favorite things, as I've mentioned many times. In the evening, as the sun is setting, all of those mountains turn red. And that is the hill country of Seir.
Edom.
It's beautiful. Edom. And as it is later designated. But Esau in the mountains of Seir. And so that's my opinion. I think we're talking about the southern tip of the Dead Sea. This is eventually the Dead Sea Basin where they cross over. They're skirting here, and then from the Wadi Zered to the Wadi Arnon is Moab. That's the designation of Moab. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I would just say if someone says, "Well, we don't have a direct reference connecting the Sea of Salt with Yam Suf," what I would counter with that, to your point, is that we have three bodies of water: one to the west, two to the south, west, and southeast. They're all referred to as Yam Suf. So quite possibly, it's not necessarily a geographic like Kinneret,
but descriptively named.
This descriptive, it's descriptive naming.
That's right. It's descriptively named. A Yam Suf has to be a Yam Suf. I mean, it's got to be a Sea of Reeds. And we have multiple, so why not another one? So it's a possibility is what I'm saying, and geographically, according to the itinerary, this probably makes sense. All right, we could talk about the elliptical construction that is.
Man, we're already an hour. Let's go.
That's right. We can't do that.
Hey, but while they're about to, I think we're at the point where if they're going to cross the Wadi Zered, what about Edom? I mean, what are they supposed to do? Are they supposed to harass the Edomites? And is that where we're at? I mean, were we that far yet? Chapter 2?
There is okay, so let's jump to chapter 2. Then we turned and we took our journey. Now, so here's the thing. With the Moses scroll, we kind of have a ... here because it was too hard to read. We're not exactly sure what it said prior to where the Moses scroll picks up. But it could well be something like this, Ross, in chapter 2. Then we turned and took our journey into the wilderness by the way of Yam Suf, by the way of the Sea of Reeds. Jehovah spake unto me, and we encompassed Mount Seir many days. We're hanging out at Iravot, perhaps. Done. And somewhere around there. And Jehovah spake unto me, saying, Ye have encompassed this mountain long enough. Turn you northward, and command thou the people, saying, Ye, and this is where the Moses scroll picks up, ye are to pass through the border of your brethren, the children of Esau that dwell in Seir. All right, your thoughts?
Yeah. That was one of the points. I won't go into a lot of detail, but this is one of the points that some of the initial people who were skeptical of the scroll's authenticity flagged because it didn't agree with the canonical. What is the major difference in this narrative? Remember?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
The major difference in this narrative as opposed to
the Moses scroll, wasn't there an initial mistake when the transcription was made by Shapira? I'm just trying to think on my feet. I think he had the wrong name. Maybe he had Lot instead of Esau, just kind of a slip of a pen. Do you remember that? Maybe I'll have to go back and look at that.
I'm not too sure about that, but what this does remind me of is that the designation of Edom is a later, like when the land becomes known as the land of Edom. Yeah. This is something that is much later. It doesn't appear in Deuteronomy, I don't think.
Okay.
It appears in many other places, and it doesn't appear in the Moses scroll. It is Esau that dwell in Seir, the mountains of Seir. This is what at that time the land is called. So, but it goes on to say, and there's a formula here, Ross. Do not contend with them. I didn't give you that land because I gave it to the Mount Seir to Esau for a possession. The interesting thing about this...
Don't harass the Edomites here.
Don't harass them. This is not your land. I gave it to them.
There's another story, another version. Go ahead.
And then it goes on to say, well, you can purchase food with money that you can eat. You can buy the water with the money that you drink. For Jehovah has blessed thee. This is Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 7. Bless thee in all the works of thy hand, that he hath known thy walking through this great wilderness. These 40 years Jehovah thy God hath been with thee. Thou hast lacked nothing. So we passed from our brethren, the children of Esau, that dwell in Seir, on the way to the Arabah from Elat. Now we have Elat.
Yeah, well, it's funny it's there, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny it's there because this is not in the Moses scroll from Ezon Geber. So it picks up and it says, and this is again where it meets the Moses scroll. And we turned and we passed by the way of the wilderness of Moab. And Jehovah said to me, don't bother them. Don't vex Moab, neither contend with them in battle, for I didn't give it to you as a land of possession. I gave it to I've given Ar to the children of Lot as a possession. Now here we have Lot. And as I mentioned, here we go. My computer's doing funny things. You still with me?
Yeah.
Okay. So Ross, we don't have Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob, but we do have Lot. Fascinating. Mm-hmm. We have no background for the mention of this man. What we do know in Genesis is that Lot, apparently, according to that narrative, which we know to be, scholars say is much later, is that he fathered his children through his daughters.
Right.
Which is something that was frowned upon when it came to Ramses II, a contemporary of Moses.
It's still pretty much frowned upon, I think. Yeah.
It's pretty frowned upon, but perhaps the narrative of Lot came off the back of this frowned upon conduct of Ramses II. But nevertheless, that is Genesis's attempt to explain where Moab and Ammon came from. I don't know that the Moses Scroll or Deuteronomy is saying, oh, yeah, there's definitely a true story that he fathered, these nations through his own daughters.
Yeah.
But it acknowledges Lot. Do you have any thoughts?
Well, I want to hear your thoughts on that because I want to talk about the not harassing Edom. Did we skip it?
Yeah, don't. Well, let's go back to that. Go to not harassing Edom.
Just not to sidetrack the other on Lot. I think you made that point very well. In fact, that's what I was thinking when I have to look at the material in the Moses Scroll on that. It feels like I almost recall that there was a transcription error when Shapira sent the first transcription to Schlotman. But I'll look that up. I'll leave a note when we post the video. But here's the deal. In chapter 2, verses 4 through 8 of Deuteronomy, they're told not to harass Edom. However, when you read in the book of Numbers, chapter 20, verse 14 through 21, there's a hostility towards Edom. It's a totally, like if you put these side by side, there seems to be two totally different narrative blocks here. And in my notes, I have that the Samaritan Pentateuch harmonizes with Numbers. But anyway, you've got several different stories, especially in the early chapters of Deuteronomy, so much that the note in the Jewish Study Bible points that out and says, look, when we're talking about this a wilderness itinerary based on Deuteronomy, it has stark differences between it and the previous stories that we've encountered. Now, this just being another one, are you going to fight with the Edomites, or are you not going to fight with the Edomites? Are you going to fight with Moab, or you're not going to fight with Moab? Did Moab give you water, or did they not give you water? Because it depends on where you read.
Did you pass through the land? Did you not pass through the land?
That's
Did you skirt the border? Did you not skirt the border? There's all these questions because they don't know. I don't know, and there's various accounts. One thing that I find really funny about this, Ross, is where it says about that they skirt Esau that dwell in Seir. Don't be trying to take their land because I didn't give it to you. Now, what happens in the Moses Scroll, and it happens here in Deuteronomy too, is that directly after God says, "Don't be looking to take their land." By the way, these are the people that used to dwell in that land. It gives us a little history lesson. These are the people that used to dwell in that land, but Esau dispossessed them and has taken their place. I gave it to them as a possession.
That's right.
By the way, Moab, don't mess with that land. Don't try and take that land. By the way, these people used to dwell in that area, but Moab dispossessed them what happens is the scribe of Deuteronomy forgets the little history lesson after Esau that dwells in Seir, jumps straight into Moab. And when it comes to the history lesson, he's saying, the Emim dwelt there, therein aforetime, a people great and many, Ross, as tall as the Anakim. These were also accounted as Rephaim, as the Anakim. By the way, there are no, obviously, giants or reference to giants in the Moses Scroll. But the Moabites called them Emim. The Horites. Oh, and then he's gone, I forgot the little history lesson. Little history lesson in regards to Seir. I better put it here. And this is what he does. He goes, the Horites, by the way, also the Horites dwell in Seir aforetime, but the children of Esau succeeded them, and they were destroyed from before them, and they dwelt in, the Edomites dwelt in their stead. Did you know that, Ross? And as Israel did to the land of his possession. So he's freaked out here. Not only has he realized he's forgotten a chunk, and he has to insert it here instead, but then he's gone, by the way, here's a massive anachronism. I'm just going to give myself away.
I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you about what happened. But I want you to know it's just like what happened to us, the children of Israel, and notice that all translations, there are no parentheses in the Hebrew, but every translator recognizes this is a parenthetical statement. It's clearly added, and almost without exception, translations put verses 9 through 12? 10 through 12 in parentheses, because it's clearly an anachronism. It's written after the fact. It's written after the children of Israel have already fully dispossessed the inhabitants of the land, right? Because that's what the author says. So when is this written? I don't know. Maybe as late as the monarchical period. At least in some respects, that's when we know that these kind of things were behind them.
So rise up and get over the brook Zered. Okay, so we went over the brook Zered, the Wadi Zered, and again, as I mentioned, the Wadi Zered is the border between Edom and Moab, and then Moab continues all the way north to the Wadi Mujib, or the Wadi Arnon. That is Moab of the day. All right, so it says, Ross, and the days which we came from Kadesh Barnea until we came over the brook of the Wadi Zered, 38 years, Ross. 38 years. We've talked about this already, but until, and there's our until all of the generation of the men of the war were consumed from the midst of the camp. Here, the men of war as opposed to the men of the rebellion in the Moses Scroll. Anything you want to highlight there?
No, I think it is important to notice the difference, though. Men of war versus men of rebellion. I mean, this whole thing is about a rebellion that took place. So, makes more sense.
Again, I'm just saying that in the Moses Scroll, they did stay in Kadesh Barnea until the men of the rebellion died off. Here it wants you to no, and look, I'm not opposed to the idea of the Israelites, once the men of the rebellion had died off at Kadesh Barnea, then ascended the mountain of the Amorite, took that whole country, and perhaps it was a 40-year campaign, or thereabouts. or the whole thing might have been. I think Amos 2:10 suggests that Jehovah led Israel through the wilderness for 40 years to possess the land of the Amorite. So sure, why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
Mm-hmm.
Where to now? My goodness, there is so much.
Man, I know. I think we have to at least do justice just to say that there are some differences between, like, for instance, we know of Zamzumim versus
Azamzumim.
Yeah.
So there's an ayin in at the beginning of the word in the Moses scroll, which is a most curious thing. Now we know that in Genesis they're referred to as the Zumim, right?
That's right. Genesis
so it's shortened
14:5.
again. That's it. Shortened again. But what do these words mean? Zamzumim, are they two words or is it one word? We don't know. Goethe does have a theory on that. I like to think that it means scheming goat, but but
could be.
But who knows? We'll wait and see. Someone smarter than me in the Hebrew will be able to figure that one out. Let's jump to 234 unless there's something that you want to highlight before. Okay.
No, that's fine.
Moving ahead, and the reason why I want to do this, Ross, is because we do have a significant detail that varies from the Moses scrolls of the Book of Deuteronomy. 234 says, "We smote him until no survivor remained." Deuteronomy seeks to give us the idea that Israel just committed a blanket genocide, that they took out not only the men of war, but in fact the women and the children. It says
and the little
ones.
Yeah.
And the little ones, the women and the little ones. It goes out of its way to insert this into the text where those details are specifically missing from the Moses scroll. And in the greater context of the Moses scroll, it seems to suggest that really men of war go out and battle with the men of war. And when it says no survivor was left to him, whether it's Sion or Og, it's talking
clearly
about
referring to soldiers. Yeah.
Talking about the army. So
by the way, this is very similar to what we saw in the final readings in the book of Bamidbar, the battle against the Midianites. And you only, as I pointed out in my class this past week, the only thing that you're to save are what is referred to in the Hebrew as the little women, the little ones, the women, or the young girls, basically, the ones who haven't slept with a man. So this means that they were even to kill women, not that were guilty of anything, but if they had even slept with a man. So again, this is really problematic when you get into these passages which we call harem text, and they are a problem. As you pointed out last week, I think we talked about atheists use these passages to really give a challenge to anybody who would believe these texts. It sounds like the Taliban.
Yeah, quite right. So people who take a fundamentalist view of these texts, quite rightly, atheists in debate will paint them into a corner and say, what are you going to do with that? How can this be morally acceptable? And they're right to do it. But it is a great relief to know that the Moses scroll makes no connection to these to such verses in that way. Where to now, Ross?
I think we have to tell people that if they're ever in the region, you can go and they've got a sign like, how if you go on vacation, you have the biggest ball of yarn or the biggest whatever. Yep. You can go see Og's bed.
His bed.
It talks about in chapter 3. Again, this is an anachronism in chapter 3, verse 11. Og is a Rephaim giant.
Yep.
Little bit exaggerated, it feels like. Tegay even suggests, if I'm not mistaken, that this is borrowed from Ugaritic myth. So, there's definitely something going on there, Yeah.
But there is a tourist destination. You can go and check out the bed and make sure you get a postcard and this and that. And people seem to know, at least the writer of Deuteronomy seems to assume the knowledge of its reader that, you've heard about this or you've seen it when you went on holidays.
That's
King
right.
Og, he's a giant. Again, no such thing in the Moses scroll. All right. Oh, now I do want to mention
go ahead.
this before we get out of this, because this is really cool, and this is something that's actually happening today. What we find is that when they go out to battle Og, right, who is apparently he is a remnant of the Rephaim, is it? Is that right? Have I got that right?
Yeah,
I recall
that's
that
right.
correctly? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They take out King Og. They have such success against him that this is the area that we refer to today as the Golan Heights. We've been up there many times.
Yeah.
And it's called, it's referred to as Heshbon, I think, in Deuteronomy and in Bashan.
Yeah.
Not Heshbon, but Bashan, the Bashan. And it says that they had such success that they managed to capture Edrei. And in the Moses Scroll, it says, and even as far as Selekah. I think does it say that in Deuteronomy? Does it take us to Selekah?
I don't believe it has Selekah, does it?
I don't know. I'm looking for that, and I'm not. Yes, it does in verse 10. So all the cities on the plain.
3:10, yeah.
3:10, all Gilad and all Bashan unto Selekah and Edrei. Now, Selekah is quite a deal east from Israel proper today, right? But all of this area is area that the campaign was successful, and they captured all of these cities.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the reason why I bring that up is because today, as we speak, there is an effort by the new Syrian regime to wage war against the Druze, and the Druze have quite a concentrated population down in that area. Mm-hmm. And it is the wish of the Druze that Israel would annex that area for their own safety.
Yeah.
Now, Israel is not opposed to this idea, because Israel has a very loyal Druze population whom they defend, and the Druze even have their own battalion in the IDF. Very, very loyal people to Israel, and with a very, very rich history. We've been up in Druze communities, Mount Carmel and so forth. And it just would not surprise me, Ross. It would not surprise me at all if Israel does decide to annex that part of Syria, Syria being in disarray after Assad.
It still is, yeah.
It still
in
is.
bad shape.
If they're going to do it, now is the time to do that. And it's interesting that this seems to be in the pipeline. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, there's a lot going on there. We almost need to do a special show. There are things going on in Gaza. There's a lot of talk there. There are a couple of good books. One is by Caroline Glick. The other is a recent book by David Friedman, former ambassador. Or I guess he's still an ambassador. He's just not in that role anymore, but he still has that title. But both of these have promoted and put forward a theory or a proposal that is what Israel does, and that ultimately that could bring peace. And some of these populations actually, contrary to what some media people might want us to believe, are actually for this. So, so whether or not they annex, there are a lot of voices who cry and say Israel has to give back the Golan where we usually visit, and that's just never going to happen. Yeah,
that's never going to happen, nor should it.
Yeah.
Nor should it. So our Torah portion actually closes at verse 22 of chapter 3. Is there anything else that you want to throw into the mix before we arrive there?
No, I tell you, it is. It's jam-packed, and the good thing about this is there's so much material, Jono, that we actually have to hold back.
Yeah,
and can't even cover everything. I do too.
Here.
I have one big note here, but we did actually cover it. It's with this part about Og and so forth. I just have giants, bold, underlined, and highlighted. The Book of Deuteronomy clearly tells us about giants and big beds and, the whole 9 yards. And, the Moses Scroll just doesn't have any of that. So I know you already said that, but it's a big part.
Yeah, it doesn't touch it at all. So, the Pentateuch. So Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, it begins with the Nephilim, and we all love that one. The Nephilim are equated with the Anakim, which is Numbers chapter 13. It's equated with the Rephaim and the Amim, that's Deuteronomy in our Torah portion now, chapter 2, verse 10 to 11. And the Zumim, which in the Moses Scroll, as you mentioned, was the Adzam Zumim, Deuteronomy 2, verse 21. Anakites are never mentioned in the Moses Scroll, but we have them in Deuteronomy 2:21. No giants. And that's because there's no giants. Yeah. So there we go. Disappointing to a lot of people.
All the fun.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's a fact. All right. So that is it. Next week, where are we?
Man, how are we going to do this?
It's a nun.
Yeah, we're going to.
It's a nun.
Yeah, we're going to.
I'm telling you.
Yeah.
We're going to be revisiting Baal Peor, Ross, very briefly. Our next Torah portion brings us back there just briefly, and we're going to have some very interesting things to say about that and a lot more in next week's Torah portion. We will be back this time next week. Until then, dear viewers, have a good one. Anything else you want to mention before we go, Ross?
Well, I was just going to say, doesn't this next Torah portion even includes the 10 words, Jono? How in the world are we going to, Ve'et Kanan. It's chapter 3, verse 23, all the way through chapter 7, I think. I don't know. We're going to have to really be... Yeah.
There we are. Overlaps massively with the Moses Scroll.
That's right.
So get your Torah tablet. We'll be here this time next week. Ezra, take us on out.
And that's where we'll leave it for today, folks. From the plains of Moab to the echoes of Horeb, we're just getting started with Moses' final words. And trust me, he's got plenty more to say. Thanks for joining us here in Devarim. If you've enjoyed the ride through these opening chapters, don't miss our next episode as we dive into the heart of the covenant and start unpacking the real meat of the Deuteronomic law. Until then, keep questioning, keep reading, and we'll see you next time on Torah Pearls.